All right, guys. So you guys hear Mad Daniel in the background already. My son is actually taking a bath in the room. So this is wonderful. A little bit earlier than our normal interviews. But we have Matt from Mountaintop Games joining us, and we're going to be talking about the primary tonight. Um, Nothing like a nice vote theme game to get the family arguments going, right there, Matt?
Yeah, how's it going?
Welcome, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Appreciate your time. I'm sure you have a pretty busy schedule going on with everything going on right now.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a fun past couple of weeks here.
I'm sure. I'm sure. It's not like too crazy, right? Like,
Nothing bad. Everything has been
that's good.
good so far. Yeah.
That's good. So before we really jump into it, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself and a little bit of what Mountaintop Games is and what's going on with the Kickstarter?
Yeah, definitely. Like you mentioned, my name's Matt. I created this little company called Mountaintop Games just to, go out there and try and my designing board games for myself. I've been playing board games my whole life. I've recently gotten into sort of the heavier or hobby board games just in the past couple of years and kind of fell in love. So I wanted to try my hand and design one for myself. So I have right now the Kickstarter for the primary, which is live now. It's been going for a few weeks, hence the craziness I mentioned earlier. And if you can't guess, it's election themed, political themed, but there's not really any politics in the gameplay. So you don't have to know the current events, you don't have to debate your friends, there's no negotiations. It's more of a strategic game about trying to win votes and go across the country and outgain people and influence and delegates and things like that.
And that's better then, yeah. So you don't have to worry about what necessarily party they're affiliated with. It's just all of it could just be sort of like a fantasy type thing, and so you're not going based on the two party system and going through all that junk, right?
Right. I wanted to keep it a little bit neutral. I know
Right.
politics can be divisive, so I didn't want to have any reference to Democrats or Republicans or the Green Party. It's just kind of this party that every player is a candidate within the primary election. So you're all trying to become the final nominee for president.
Okay. Well, that's pretty excellent. So tell me, where did you come up with the idea for the game?
Yeah, it was definitely inspired by the last election cycle. I kind of got drawn in and started following the news a little bit more and followed more closely along the campaigns and tried to see, I felt a little bit more invested. So throughout the process of the election, I kind of noticed or it kind of dawned on me,
Hmm.
the primary election process is really interesting. I couldn't really understand the history behind, why do all the states vote one at a time or at different points in time, where the general election, everyone votes on the same day. It's over really quick.
Right.
And I thought that would translate pretty interestingly to a board game, and that's just kind of how the idea sprung up.
Um, did any other games you've played in the past influence your design?
Um, I would say yes, maybe not directly. Kind of like I mentioned, I'm not the most experienced or veteran hobby board gamer. I don't have all these plays to my name. So, at the time when I started the design, it was about a little over a year ago. And,
Okay.
I was still kind of getting into the hobby, learning about games and different mechanics. So I was still playing some of the lighter to medium weight games. And I think that type of experience is kind of what shaped what I wanted this game to feel like and play like.
Right.
Even if maybe the mechanics or anything was directly influencing or inspiring the game, I think that's kind of what helped shape the idea and the design.
So you talk about how you just sort of entered the arena of medium to heavyweight games, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, Tell me a little bit about that. Now, I mean, how recent is that? Is that transition over?
Um, so I probably started playing some of like, these hobby board games, if you will, a couple
Yeah.
years ago. I
Hmm.
moved back to Madison, Wisconsin, and kind of reconnected with some old roommates.
Okay.
And they sort of introduced me to all these cool and more complex board games.
Right.
But kind of slowly. And I was really drawn to them. And
So
every time we played something new, I would just love it and kind of want to go deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole.
of course, I have to ask, what was the fix? What was the first one? What was the one that they're like, hey,
Oh man.
let me give you a bump here, man.
So with my friends here, it was probably Evol.
Oh, we might have got a freeze on you there on Skype. You there? We might have a connection issue with Matt. Hold on, guys.
Let's see if I can.
Okay, nope, I got your back.
I'm
Got your
back.
back. You're back.
Okay.
Sorry.
I
So
don't
with your
know. It's
friends,
probably my side. My internet here isn't the best, but I
it's
am
it's
plugged in.
it's okay. This is the nature of live streams. If everything went well, then something would be wrong. So
So I was saying, I think we were like on what was my bump? What was my first
yeah,
few games?
yeah, they were like, hey, they saw you walking down the street. They were in a dark alley. They were like, yo, man, you gotta check this out.
hmm I would say one of the first ones that they were really in love with and introduced me to was Evolution.
Okay,
Uh,
yeah,
so that one was really cool.
that's
I
North Star Games, right?
yeah.
Yep,
So like
yeah.
I'm a science fan. I enjoyed the theme, kind of coming up with your own species and fighting each other, and it had a little bit more depth than some of the other games I played. My girlfriend and her family love Ticket to Ride, and they got
Okay,
me kind of started on that.
yeah.
Um, so I think throughout, they kind of introduced me to heavier and heavier stuff, and kind of depending on who I'm playing with, I don't have always the best opportunities to play some of that like heavier or more complex games, but whenever I get the
Right.
chance, I'm always interested.
What was the heaviest game you've attacked at this point in your playing career?
Um, let's see, some of the Caverna and Agricola games
Okay.
from Uwe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know these aren't super heavy, but for me, this is kind of where I've
That's
been going.
right, but I mean, honestly, that's part of the journey.
Yeah, yeah.
And I have to ask, I know we're gonna jump around a little bit here, but yeah, physically heavy. No, we're talking strategy wise, the weight of the strategy in the game.
Hmm.
Um, so, at what point were you sitting at a game table or driving down the street and going, I think I could make one of these games?
I don't know if I could point to like a specific moment in time. I'm an engineer by training. I've always been kind of like a creative type a little bit,
Yep.
and always into, trying to invent something or build something or create something artistically or musically.
Yep.
Um, so I couldn't point to a specific time, but my first couple ideas kind of just crashed and burned. The first thing I tried to have my friends play was this hiking theme,
Okay.
and it was like this through hike where you're hiking hundreds of miles, and um, I think the experience kind of matched what you would expect from that type of grueling hiking and camping theme,
Yeah.
where it was just hours long, and we should have cut it short, but we didn't, and it
Yep.
was just not very fun. So early learning for sure.
You built a life experience simulator, and I think that's one of the things that a lot of game designers, especially hobbyists that go into it, they take experiences from their own lives and they translate it into a game because they
Right.
want to tell a story. So usually something like personal, and they want to bring other people to the experience without having to actually go through some of that experience. And I think that's what a lot of hobbyists, like a lot of hobby game designers, end up doing. And it's something you also mentioned. You have an engineering background,
Mm-hmm.
because so many people I talk to who are just jumping into board games as a hobbyist and then trying to eventually enter it maybe as a living. They're engineers. They're high
Mm-hmm.
level. They're in high level tech positions. In hospitals or in in government. And they take that analytical information they have, and rather than like a musician putting notes, and there are technical musicians too, but they take that experience and they know they take what they know, numbers
Right.
and probability,
Yep.
and they make something artistic with it. And that's one of the great things about board games. It's like a form of art, and a form of artistic expression, from somebody who's very technical, sort of trying to relate to other people, through this
Right. Right.
form of art. That's what I found anyway. I don't know.
No, I would agree. I definitely struggle balancing like trying to create a simulator versus trying to abstract something into something that's fun in a
Right.
game. I think some themes that have intrigued me kind of led me down the path of okay, you're just trying to simulate this as opposed to what would be something fun to play where you still
Hmm.
get the theme and the experience that you're looking for. So I think you're dead on there.
Yeah. So you mentioned other games that you tried before this, but this product here, the
Mhm.
primary, how long did it take for you to get from the idea to what is your final production version?
Um, so I would say it's been just over a year.
Okay.
The idea had kind of been brewing in my mind, but I never actually tried to put pen to paper or like really test anything out until yeah, just over a year ago. And the Kickstarter launched a few weeks back. So it's not the final version. There's still some last minute tweaking and playtesting, trying to really perfect the balance and everything else. But
Right.
that's it's been the process, and a year kind of seems both like a very long time ago and at the same time like yesterday. So it's been a whirlwind for sure.
Absolutely. Now the link is in chat, guys. If you guys want to check out the Kickstarter, you're better than halfway to your goal, right? Definitely. You're sending about 10,310 of your $1,500 goal. Sorry,
Yeah.
$15,000 goal. Um, so 13 days left on the Kickstarter. If you guys want to take a look at the page as we go along, the second part of this interview today, I'm gonna give him the reins here, and he's gonna show us how the game works out. So we'll get into that later. But that is the Kickstarter link that I posted there. So yeah, so about a year.
Hmm.
Very good. Through that process, yeah, I'm going to ask you because I mean, I'm also entering into design myself. I have my first design that I've been working on, and art is my big hurdle right now.
Right,
What did
right.
you end up doing for art?
So I tried to carry out a pretty extensive search.
Okay.
I knew going into it that I wanted to do Kickstarter. I kind of fell in love with the idea once I learned about the whole board game industry within Kickstarter. Just
Mm-hmm.
kind of became this bucket list thing for me. Um, and I knew nowadays you have to have really good looking art just to even be considered. It's kind of just table stakes to be on Kickstarter these days.
Yeah.
Um, so I just searched around the internet. I searched BGG. I looked at all the games that I thought had cool art.
Mm-hmm.
I just made this giant list of all the artists and graphic designers, and I ended up working with OK Art Studio, who a big shout out to them. I think they've done an amazing job with the game,
I
and they're
agree.
actually a husband and wife team from Argentina.
Okay.
It's a really cool story, a really great couple. The husband, Sebastian, works and does graphic design, and he
Mm-hmm.
did the Kickstarter page.
Great.
And Rocio is the wife, and she does all the like artwork and illustrations. So that made it really easy for me. It's kind of this one-stop shop where I
Yeah.
can just talk to them, and obviously them living together, they can communicate very easily together and make a cohesive design and
Of course.
artwork overall.
Thank you for the sub, Fresh Coke. Thank you so much. Um, yeah. So now they're a couple in Argentina.
Mhm.
They did the art for you. Um, what what was the conversation like? How easy were the conversations between them and you? And I guess were they the first person you went with, or was it like a stumble process? And you don't have to mention any names or anything of the people that you
Sure,
might have
sure.
stumbled with, but were there others before you finally got to them?
Um, so I kind of reached out to a bunch of people just to understand, I had a guess of, how much artwork would like roughly cost, but every artist, is going to have a different rate, or they
Mm-hmm.
might anticipate more or less work, or they, just every little variable can change. So I reached out, tried to get, quotes. Some people didn't have availability. A
Right.
lot of these artists get backed up and they have projects on projects on projects. Um, but they were definitely people that I were interested in, like right from the start. And everything has been really smooth. They're awesome to work with. We do everything through email and Google Documents. So
Okay.
they'll send me files, and I'll make like a quick PowerPoint or Google Slides, and
Mm-hmm.
just put in some comments, tell
Okay.
them some tweaks and things like that I want to make, and everything has gone really well, and they've been awesome and very flexible. Working with a first-time designer and Kickstarter creator, I'm sure is not the easiest thing for them,
Right.
but they've been just awesome through the whole process.
That's great. And so that's phenomenal because, like I said, that's my biggest bump in the road right now for me. Uh,
Right.
so what pitfalls, if any,
Hmm.
um, have you encountered during the Kickstarter process? And what advice would you give someone interested in designing their own game?
Right. Um, so I think a lot of the pitfalls or kind of stumbling blocks I've found have been on the business side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I get some of that from work and working on different projects, and so I've been lucky in that sense where I've had some exposure to some of these types of areas of business. But just trying to anticipate and work with manufacturers and work
Okay.
with fulfillment companies and making sure you have a P&L to see, okay, where can I break even? How many games do I need to sell? How many games do I need to print?
You're
How
right.
much does it cost to ship? How much does it cost for ocean freight? Everything.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot to it, a lot more than I would have anticipated from the start.
Right.
Um, I think shipping and fulfillment, especially, is a very tough one to crack,
Of course.
and it's kind of an iterative or a cyclical process where
Yep.
you're estimating based on a number of games, and then your shipping
Right.
changes, and then your manufacturing changes, and then oh, well, now I need to redo all my estimates. And, that process has just been a learning one for sure.
Of course. Well, I mean, isn't that part of your initial budget though? Like when you go to Kickstarter, or did you just sort of wing it and like, oh, I'll figure out the shipping and everything later?
No, so I did have that all roughly figured out beforehand. I wanted
Uh-huh.
to make sure, with the minimum ordered quantities from printing overseas, roughly where I could break even. That's my goal for the Kickstarter. Is as long as I don't lose too much money, I'll be happy.
Mm-hmm.
If I break even, I'll be thrilled. So just making sure that, okay, if I print 500 or 1,000 games, how much are they going to cost to ship here? How
Right.
many am I going to be stuck with left over if we
Correct.
get, 300 or 400 backers? So I had a rough idea planned out, but as always, it's hard to anticipate, what countries people are going to be coming from, how many
Correct.
quantities they're going to order. So sometimes you just got to take a stab and hope for the best.
That's very true. Did you have like a tool, like a spreadsheet or something that was shared with you, or did you develop your own in this process to figure out the P&L?
Right. Let's see. I had something that I had from work.
Okay.
So I work with some basic P&Ls at work, so I was lucky to get kind of that exposure through there. And then I kind of created my own custom one, um, just so it was laid out exactly how I wanted it with the different shipping regions and retail and online sales after the Kickstarter and everything that I could think of that might happen, just trying to plan ahead.
Okay.
So it's kind of this custom form that I've made, and I've been slacking on this a little bit, but I have a website, and I'm trying to help share my experiences and any resources that I've used along the way.
Okay.
So that's definitely something that once this is all over and settled, and things are kind of back to normal, I definitely want to try and get some things that I found useful, and that's one of them that hopefully I can share a template and
Yeah.
future
And
Kickstarters.
we have, I mean, there's a community that I'm a part of that we could talk later too, and we
Mhm.
might be able to help with that sharing process.
Awesome.
Um, so basically, I have two questions, well, three questions for the audience. Two people are asking the same question, and it might be a gag question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How much does how much does the game weigh, like weight wise?
So I've gotten estimates from a factory, and I
Okay.
believe they were saying 1.5 kilograms, which should be just under 4 pounds,
Okay.
um, which is really good for shipping purposes. And I don't know if that's a pro or a con for
Right.
players, but I think it's going to end up just under 4 pounds potentially.
Yeah. Yeah. So the other question I have, or this is more of a statement, and it follows up with a question. Eric the Great states that he noticed there's similar election slash campaign themed games that looked a lot like yours that came out over
Hmm.
the past year or so. What would you say sets yours apart? And how hard was it to not accidentally be too similar to those games that you designed?
Sure. So I don't know if I know all the ones that he's referencing. I know Campaign Trail was one that was out on Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of went through this research and benchmarking process. I didn't end up playing a ton of them, but I read rule books and I looked stuff up on BGG. And I think the first thing that sets it apart is it's a primary election theme as opposed to the general election, where I think a lot of games out there just kind of focus on one candidate versus the other,
Mm-hmm.
Republican versus Democrat, and you're kind of facing off in all 50 states. Where the primary, my game is based on the primary election process. And it's got kind of this mechanic where regions of the country, the states are clumped together for gameplay purposes, but regions of the country vote at different points in time. And kind of the way that you move around the map and you strategize is through action programming with different types of cards.
Okay.
So I feel like the combination of the theme and some of the mechanics make it a little bit different from some of the games that were out there. I'm not sure I found anything that was really more focused on the primary election as opposed to the general election.
I didn't see anything honestly, and it did seem like a fresh idea when I just glanced over it. And Eric, just so you know, the second part of this, he has a prototype that he's gonna be able to show us and sort of walk us through like setup and how
Mm-hmm.
the game works out. Um, so how do you balance? And I'll preface this by saying I found that almost every gamer or every board game designer at this point that I've encountered wears at least three hats. They have their personal or their normal 9 to 5 job or whatever, their regular job. They have the board game design, and then they have a blog or a podcast or something they do to get their face out there at the same time as they're doing their board
Mm-hmm.
games. Almost every board game designer also has that deep need to share the design experience with everybody in the community to try to help them as well. But
Mm-hmm.
that's what I found. I found three hats are usually, there's sometimes more because some of them actually, as they've been in the business for longer, they start putting on developer hats and art
Mm-hmm.
director hats, and you know what I mean. But so at
Right.
this point, are you a three hat guy? And tell me about how you balance it all.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think, especially with Kickstarter, it's so many hats, you can't really count them all. But definitely it's been a struggle to try and, first be competent enough with each of the hats that, you can put together a good product and something that people are going to be interested in.
Right.
Um, but, thankfully it's been something that I've really enjoyed. So, I come home from work, I'm tired, I'm stressed, I eat dinner, but I'm excited to get to work again. But this time, on board games and something that, I like a lot. So the design part and the development part, that was a lot of fun. I love playtesting. I love getting to watch people enjoy something that I've created.
Yep.
Um, and then that was a good long process and a difficult one at that with balancing and trying to make sure it could be as fun as possible. But now recently I've kind of transitioned into some of these other hats, if you will, where I had to go through art direction and help guide the artwork and the graphic design. I had to go through kind of the business minded hat with the financials and
Yep.
working with manufacturers and shipping companies. The marketing hat, like you mentioned, where I'm trying to be active and engage people on social media and
Yep.
contribute back to the community where I can and share my process and things that I've learned.
Yes.
Um, I have a website. I've, you know, done pretty poorly at, maintaining it. And the intent was to keep people up to date with, the projects I'm working on and then also sharing things that I learn and resources. I've just, I'm not a great writer. I'm not the best communicator. So I found it harder than I anticipated to, keep a regular blog post going,
Yep.
writing these updates, making these designer diaries. So I think that was the first thing that kind of suffered and fell off was the website and the blog posts.
Right.
But yeah, there's just so many different roles and different things that you have to take care of when you're designing a game and putting it on Kickstarter yourself. But it's awesome. It's a great learning experience for sure.
Absolutely. And how many times like the passion gets you through those rough points? Like, if you were
Hmm.
doing this for, Jim Bob at the paint store, you'd just be like, dude, I don't get paid enough to do this job. And the reality is this game, designing these games, you're not getting paid anything yet. And you're
Hmm.
putting like, 1,000 times more effort than you would, just that passion gets you past all that extra crap you have to do.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah,
Um,
I don't want to think about the hours that are going into it, and then, like I mentioned, if I break even with this, I'd be ecstatic. So,
right.
I mean, it's a passion project. It's a hobby. I'm not looking at it as a business. I'm not trying to make a profit. So,
Yeah.
it's just something fun for me, really.
You just want to get it out there. It's a legacy piece, like you said before. It's on the bucket list, and that's another check mark. And that's funny. These things start that way, and maybe we'll go someplace else, but it depends on how it ends up for you. If it breaks even,
Right.
and it's like, hey, I got my game out there, I'm a happy man. I get to go to some cons, sell some extra copies,
Yeah,
do
yeah,
do
yeah.
the fun part now. But yeah, this is definitely the struggle point where you are where you're right now.
Hmm.
Um, so, game design is often a reflection of one's own life. We talked about that earlier. What aspects of your life, or your profession do you
Hmm.
feel became a part of what you've created?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on it there when you said profession.
Mm-hmm.
I love spreadsheets, so I think that definitely has crept into my game design process and how I, go through and design and develop and tweak things. I like to think I'm organized, but just going through playtests and taking as many notes as I can. I think that sort of meticulous nature that I have is at least reflected in the process. I don't know if it shows through into the final game, but I definitely think some aspects of my personality and my background lead me to be the type of designer I am for sure.
Of course, of course. For anybody just joining us, this is Matt with Mountaintop Games. Matt, pronounce your last name for me because I'm not even going to try to take a stab at it.
It's Quack.
Quock, Q
Yep.
U O C K, right?
Yep. Perfect.
So this is Matt, and I'm going to actually throw that up there. I forgot to do that earlier.
No worries. Hello, everyone.
And we are just discussing his game, The Primary, which is currently on Kickstarter.
Hmm.
Um, and that is his information that I'm sliding into place. There we go.
Awesome.
And Tito, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Um, so I think we touched on this, but what ultimately pushed you into game design? I think it was just playing the games and realizing, I think I could do this.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. I think I tend to get passionate about something for a little while and get really excited and then kind of fall off the wagon. And this luckily wasn't one of them. I've had the ability to stick through it, but just being a somewhat creative person and some of my background in engineering and whatnot, I think it just came naturally. Or I fell in love with board games, and the next step is making your own.
Yes, yes. Um, I think we touched on this too. Many designers have more than one project they're working on. You said that you had ones you worked on previous to this one. Is there anything else that's sort of like, now that you're in the Kickstarter, you're almost funded? Are you like, okay, I've done it. This is it, or are there things in your head going now? Okay, well, I also have this idea for this.
Right, right. Um, so once I knew I wanted to try and put this on Kickstarter, my goal was really to focus on this and only this.
Hmm.
That wasn't always the case. Once in a while I'd have this idea pop into my head that I just couldn't get out of it.
Yep.
Until I had to write it down or prototype something really quick and say, okay, got it out of my system. Let's put it on the shelf, come back to it later. I really wanted to focus and get this done. Um, I kind of just at one point, put a date down and said, okay, let's make it happen.
Hmm.
Let's do the Kickstarter. Um, there was a delay or two here, but I think only a month or a month and a half from when I really kind of set this date for myself. So there are a few ideas brewing. There's a bunch of stuff that didn't quite fit or didn't fit within the scope of the game that at some point who knows? I could try and look at an expansion. There's other unique game ideas that I have, but
Yeah,
um, this process has been pretty crazy. So I'll probably take a little break afterwards.
of course.
I know there's going to be a lot involved with manufacturing and fulfillment that it's not going to be just Kickstarter is over and I can
Right,
kick back and relax, but
right.
I'll definitely try and take my time before I go back at it full steam.
Yeah. Tito has a question for you. Why are you
Uh-huh.
standing up when there's a couch behind you?
So if you can see my setup here, it's very janky. I've got my laptop on top of an IKEA box, which is on a table, and that
Perfect.
table is where I have the game that I'll set up and show you guys in a little bit.
Perfect.
So I figured once I go to demo, I'm going to be over here messing around and moving parts around. So it's a little probably a little weird to watch me stand here, but I don't know.
Yeah,
My
we're almost there.
my
We're almost
setup
there.
limits me here.
Last thing I'm gonna ask before we transition. There's actually two questions, but the first one is mainly, is there anyone else that helped you in this process that you'd like to give a shout out to or a plug? While you have a moment to do so now.
Yeah, you'll probably have to get the music ready like the movie awards because there's just a ton of people.
Da-na-na-na-na-na.
So cut me off whenever you want, but
No, it's okay. I mean, I really, this is your opportunity to sort of get that out there.
yeah.
I mean, it'll probably be in the footnotes of your instruction manual, but
Hmm.
go ahead.
Hmm.
Let us know, who else was involved that you want to thank.
Yeah, so I actually started the design with my roommate Justin Hertz. I kind of came up with the idea, and then I told him about it, and we talked, and like he was very involved at the beginning of the process, and then he moved away. He got a new job and got really busy, and kind of had to drop out of the design and the development process. And he just told me, man, take it, go run with it,
Yeah,
have a good time. He knows all the work that's involved. So a big shout out to Justin. He was, involved from the very beginning and, helped contribute a lot.
mm-hmm.
Um, my girlfriend, Abby Schultz, has also been there from the very beginning. She's been playtester number one, a big help in the development, trying to figure out what's fun, what's not, what's working, and what's, unbalanced.
Perfect.
Um, the artwork, like I mentioned, OK Art Studio, they've done an awesome job, I think. Um, and also just a bunch of local designers here in Madison, where there's a actually like pretty vibrant group of board game designers and self-publishers and Kickstarter creators, and they've been a huge help both in like the design side of things, but then also as far as Kickstarter goes and anything sort of like more business related, they've had a bunch of helpful tips and tricks to make this as smooth of a process for me as possible. Um, so yeah, a ton of people have been helpful, even during the Kickstarter campaign. Just all the excitement and support from friends and family has been, overwhelming. So a lot of people have been very involved, posting stuff on social media and
Right.
all that kind of stuff. So just a big thanks to everyone who's been
And the
doing all
current
this.
backers too, because I mean, the
Yeah.
current
Oh,
backers there.
how could I forget? Thank you very much. Before yeah, definitely. Backers first and foremost, I should say. I had no idea how much interest there would or wouldn't be in this game, and yeah, just a big thanks to everyone who's excited about it and puts their hard-earned money towards this game. So thank you a lot for
Uh,
sure.
Excellent. Now Tito has another question. I said there's only going to be two, but there's actually another one here.
Mm-hmm.
Tito said, where did you what games did you borrow from mechanics wise, or what influenced your design of this game? And we'll see it when you talk about it, and you could go into more depth, but
Sure.
you just give us an idea of what games you pulled influence from.
Mm-hmm. Um, so like I mentioned before, I'm not the most well-versed board game player, having
Mm-hmm.
only been playing sort of these hobby games or whatever for the past few years.
Right.
So I would say the primary mechanics involved in this are area control and action programming, and then like simultaneous action a little bit. And each player has a candidate that they play as. So there's like variable player powers.
Okay.
And some of these, I wouldn't even say I'd played a game that had action programming in it before designing this. And some of that came from Justin, my roommate, at the very beginning of the process. So I don't know if, either intentionally or unintentionally, I pulled specific mechanics from specific games.
Right.
It just kind of all fell into place. And I'm sure some of them I had played somewhere else and probably didn't realize that it's, either similar or inspired by something out there. But
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a cop out answer or not, but I couldn't
No,
really say a specific game that was really like, oh, I love this. Let's bring it into here.
right. I think it's just something that like some of the again, you come from an analytical background, so some of the things you worked out or you work out in game design are like the logical steps to take for an action you might take in a game to make it fun and to make it feel like you are participating in that action. So like worker placement, you might call it that, or Euro style worker placement. You know, somebody who is an engineer or has a higher level mathematic background or planning background will just say, okay, well, you take this and you put it here to make sure that you get this, on every turn. And but like if somebody who's been in board game design for a long time is like, oh, that's advanced Euro hero worker placement, for that
Right,
kind
right.
of mechanic. Um, so a lot of these things, are logical processes that you come to, and then you might hit a game like in 4 or 5 months or 7 years from now, and you're like, man, this game was out like 20 years before mine. I didn't realize that it's like that element of my game is just like it, but I didn't even know that existed.
Right,
Sometimes you
right.
stumble into those things. But yeah, so there you go. Um, so last question before you show us your game, what is
Sure.
your favorite board game aside from Hero?
Oh man. Um, that's definitely changed over the course of time. I
Uh-huh.
think right now I've been getting more and more into worker placement games, like you
Hmm.
mentioned. And I would say my favorite at the moment, and I know I'm a little late to the party, but I really enjoy viticulture.
Okay.
Um, and there's also a few like two-player games that I really like. I probably play most of my games with my girlfriend.
Hmm.
My local board game group kind of dissolved a little while back. I'm starting up again, found some new people, but we do play a lot of like two-player only games or games that are specific for two players. So um, those are probably most
Anyone
of
that
what I'm playing.
anyone that comes to the top of your like what's your favorite two-player game?
I really like the Cave versus Cave, again from the Caverna,
Okay.
series or family or whatever. I really like that one.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever played that one. We my wife and I are a big fan of Patchwork, and
Yep.
we also enjoy the two-player variant of King Domino. We'll normally play that together
Okay.
because they're quick. Paperback we also play a lot of together, but
Okay.
those
Sure.
those are,
Sure.
those are like the two-player. Um, so 1 second, Tito. Is it hard to like get the rules? Okay, so is it hard to get the rules of the game? Like comparing your game to Risk, and we'll see that in a second, Tito. So I won't
Sure.
really go
Sure.
into that. Um,
I mean, I can try and comment real quick if you want.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So the intent with the game was to be very accessible. Maybe if somebody's really into politics, but not so much board games, that they could pick it up and learn it pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
So just from teaching people and play tests and everything like that, and demos during the Kickstarter campaign, usually I can teach the rules in like 5 to 10 minutes.
Right.
So it's pretty easy to pick up, but there's still a decent amount of strategy and tactics where it doesn't feel like a simple game, even though it's easy to learn.
Right, and you want the players to figure that out. Like that's part of the entertainment of the game is that they one of the rules that I've come to find out through different seminars and stuff that I went to, but they mentioned that you don't want to over explain the game in the instructions.
Hmm.
Sometimes we feel the need to because we're like, okay, well they know that you could send this over here and it'll do a chain reaction to this. You don't actually want to tell them that. You want the players to figure that out because you want to keep it open for them to sort of explore and find out themselves. And
Right.
I mean, how many times have you looked at your instructions? You're like, should I tell them that you could do this, or should they figure that out on their own? You know what I mean?
Yeah, the discovery part of it, especially with different strategies and stuff like that, is half the fun for sure.
Yes, yes. Reach asks, how many friendships have been tested by your game?
Um, I would actually say the good thing about this game, well, depending on your viewpoint, is that it's fairly neutral. So even though there's a political theme, if you can play this with a group of really far left leaning and really far right leaning people politically, and you never ever have to discuss anything related to politics or hot topic issues or anything like that. So luckily, the only reason that I usually get mad at people when we're playing is somebody's, taking too long on their turn or trying to decide what cards they want to play.
Yeah. Tito clarified. I believe what Tito meant when they said, how hard is it to get the rules? I believe Tito meant, how long did it take you to come up, like to actually hash out the rule book and the
Oh,
instructions?
sure.
And that is a longer process than than 10 to 15 minutes.
Oh, for sure. So the actual physical rules and all the text and everything involved with, the instructions on how to play the game, that's definitely been a long process. Um, I don't know if I could put it into weeks or months. It's kind of something there. It's just a living document, and wherever I got the chance, I would, tweak something here or there. I'd like to go out onto like social media and talk to other designers and say, hey, if you read my rule book, I'll read yours, and we'll do
Yeah.
these swaps.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'd get my dad and I'd sit him down and I'd say, hey, Dad, read this rule book, set up the game as if you were trying to learn it for the first time, give me some feedback on what's confusing, what's not.
Yeah.
There's been a ton of iterations, and even with the graphic design, where there's a nice, pretty looking rule book right now, but
Hmm.
we're still going through and making sure everything's very clear and understandable, and the visuals and the examples are all they make sense and they're helpful, everything like
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Yeah, because and I apologize, Tito, that I didn't understand your question the first time we saw it. All right, so do you want to let's strap in and show us how this game works here?
Yeah, for sure. I
All
have a
right.
copy here. It's one of the ones that I put together for reviewers on Kickstarter. So
Okay.
the quality of the components isn't going to be quite the same as what you'll get in a finally like mass-produced version. But here's the box, the front cover with some of the artwork. Um, put that down, and I can try and set the game up for you. And I'm going to adjust my screen as well, so I'm probably going to set the game up on the table.
Yep.
You won't have to look at me anymore. You can just look at all the components.
Yeah, you guys don't have to worry about like just watching him stand anymore. It's not gonna make not gonna be this awkward watching him stand anymore. Matt, again,
um,
I really do appreciate your time to doing this with us too. So I just wanted
yeah. Thanks for having me. It's been fun, and I'm glad that we have some people here who are interested to see how to play. So here's the
sure.
back of the box in case you're curious. Again, all of the artwork is more or less finished, but we are making tweaks or taking in backer recommendations and suggestions. So definitely open to feedback if there's anything that you think would make the game better or more attractive or whatever you have. Yeah, just let me know.
Yep.
So just to make sure everyone's on the same page, the primary is about a primary election in the United States where all the candidates are playing, all the players are playing as candidates within the same political party.
Hmm.
So this is the map of the United States. The states are split into regions, and each region is worth a certain number of delegates. So you want to win these delegates throughout the course of the game by having the most influence in a region during its vote.
Look at Matt. This is like a semi-professional setup. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. Let's see. There's a little lag with the camera, so I'm not sure what
No,
the view looks like
it's
yet.
looking pretty good. And do you want some space underneath the? There you go. Yeah, if you want to get
Yep.
a little bit underneath the board.
Okay. So the game is played over the course of 11 rounds,
Okay.
and during those 11 rounds, um, these 14 different regions are going to vote at different points in time.
So give me 1 second. I'm going to adjust some lighting here for this for the board.
Sure.
So give me 1 second, guys. I'm going to try to get that fixed for you guys. Where is? Let me know when it looks a little bit better for you all.
It's looking a little bright, but I have some lag, so I'm going to be quiet.
Yeah. And turn saturation up a little bit to really make the colors pop for you too.
Awesome.
All right, that should be better, I think, for the stream. I hope you guys can see that a little bit better.
All right. So, there's 11 rounds in the game, and each round is represented on some of these tokens. So the number printed on the token represents the round. And these are going to be randomly distributed across the country, with the exception of a few that have a predetermined setup for your first few games while you're learning how to play. So these tokens down here are not associated with votes and are non-voting tokens.
Okay.
So otherwise, you can kind of just randomize the rest of these tokens and distribute them across the map. Each region is going to have one of these tokens on it. So when you're randomizing, each time you play, you're going to have a slightly different experience. And then as you play more and more, hopefully, you can choose, okay, I want to have a certain setup where we can create these different scenarios, and regions can vote in whatever order that you want.
I like it.
So
I like the premise of that. It's almost it's Catan-like in that respect.
Yeah, definitely.
See, there we go. Influence number one right there.
There we are. I definitely was playing Catan at the point when I was designing this, so there's one of the influences. Okay. So like I said, the number on the token represents the round. So for instance, up here, this token has 8 on it. So during round 8, that region will vote. And these voting markers are just used to show what the current round is.
Okay.
So throughout the course of the game, you're going to be moving around the country, trying to get influence in these regions. And as each round progresses, you're going to move around the vote, and you're going to earn delegates from regions that are voting. So we set up the board with the tokens. Let's dive a little bit down into the 4 phases that happen during each round. So the first phase is pretty straightforward. It's the news phase. There is a deck of cards with current events for each round. So you're going to take them, shuffle them up, put them next to the board. And at the beginning of each round for phase 1, you're going to draw 1 card off the top. Let's see if I can get it in focus here.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, just tilt it a little bit back toward you so we could the shine. I don't think we can read it, but I like the design of that.
Thank you. So each card is going to have just some sort of effect that is applied to the current round. It's going to force you to change your strategy a little bit. It might make certain actions more or less valuable. For instance, this first card that I'm drawing is called Frequent Flyer. Plane cards do not cost an influence cube this round. So planes are one way that you can get around the country, and because of the current events of this round, you can fly for free.
Oh, okay.
So that's just one example of what the news might look like, and they're all unique.
So your news cards are basically event cards that'll trigger like a round-wide event that affects any player's turn during that round.
Right.
Got it.
And it might be an immediate action that every player has to take in turn order, or it might be something that kind of occurs during the round as you play it.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the first phase, the news, pretty straightforward. The second phase is called action, and that's where really the meat of the game happens. And I'll kind of dive in and explain to you how that works.
Sure.
So every player has a small deck of cards, if you will, and they're all exactly the same. You all have 14 cards, and there's 7 different actions you can take with these cards.
Okay. Some of them are doubled up, I guess.
Yeah, so they each have a different quantity in your hand depending on what type of card it is.
Got it.
So the main premise of the game and how you take your actions is every round, players will choose simultaneously 4 of their action cards that they want to play for the round.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
So you're going to take them and place them face down in the left to right order that you want them to be executed.
Excellent. Excellent.
And everyone does that at the same time. So once everyone's ready to go, let's say I'm first player. You take the first player token just to show who's first player. I'll flip over my first card and take its action.
Okay.
And then second player would flip over their first card and take its action. Third player, first card, take its action, and back to me.
Okay.
I'll do my second card, second card, second card. Third card, third card, third card. Fourth card, fourth card, fourth card.
Tito asks, is the game available in Europe? And that is, if you get it from Kickstarter, are you shipping to Europe right now?
I am.
Yeah,
So there's a different shipping cost depending where you live. Europe is a little bit more than the US, but the hope or the intent is that it'll be EU VAT tax friendly. So it'll either ship directly from within the EU, or if the quantities dictate that we ship it from the US, all of the fees would be paid or reimbursed by myself. So it is going to be shipping to Europe, and we're trying to make it as EU VAT
friendly. Yeah.
friendly as possible.
Now, just so you know, Tito, it will still be in American elections. It won't be like a European election game. It's the same game, but yes, this game you could get shipped over to Europe.
Right. That'll
If
be
you
the follow-up sequel. We'll vote for Parliament in Britain or something
Yeah,
else.
exactly. Or EU elections, like general elections or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
So there's a link, Tito, right there for the Kickstarter. If you were interested, the shipping and stuff is outlined on the um, on that webpage. Uh, so now my question, looking at those actions that you put up,
Mhm.
I saw two fundraisers, or you had a few fundraisers. If you play a fundraiser and then somebody plays a fundraiser next to you, is the initial fundraiser like more value and then it diminishes as the turn goes on, or what happens based on that order?
Right. So for those cards, there is no specific interaction based on turn order or who goes first. There is some uh, tension or interaction on some of the other cards. So I can run through real quick and describe to you each of the 7 cards. It'll be pretty quick.
Sure, sure.
So the first one is a bus. Hopefully you can see these if I just put them here. So the bus is pretty straightforward. If I am the blue candidate and I'm located right here, if I play the bus card, I can move from my current region to an adjacent region, and that's a free action. It doesn't cost me anything to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Each player will have a small bank of influence cubes, and
Okay.
these act as both influence during a vote and also sort of as currency, um, sort of how it works in the US right now. Anyways, it's like currency equals influence equals, political power.
Sure, sure.
So you're going to have your bank, and then you're going to have some of the cubes that you have available to spend, whether that's traveling or paying for advertising, things like that. You need to earn cubes from your bank into your hand before you can spend them.
Okay.
But the bus is free. So the other way to travel around the country is the plane.
Mm-hmm.
And this costs 1 cube, so you'll put a cube back into your bank, and you
Mm-hmm.
can now fly from your current region anywhere you want. It doesn't matter how far or close away it is from you.
Okay. Now, with the exception of the event this turn, that would be free, right? You wouldn't have to expend a cube to play the plane?
Right. So good
Okay.
catch. The frequent flyer news card allows me to fly for free this turn.
Okay, cool. Very cool.
So each of those cards, the bus and the plane, you only have 1 each in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
The next card is the rally. So let's say now I'm set up here in this region voting during round 8, and I really want to get the electorate excited about me. I'm going to hold a rally.
Mm-hmm.
So what that does is I take 2 cubes from my hand, and I can place them in my current region. I'm giving a speech. They're getting really excited. They want to vote for me, but I can only place those cubes where I'm located.
Okay.
It's where my rally is.
Okay.
Now, another way that you can spread your influence is with the positive ad. And this card allows me to take 1 cube from my hand, and I can place it in any region on the map. Doesn't matter how close or far away. Kind of like you're paying for a TV commercial, spreading the word, getting your name out there.
Of course, yeah.
The flip side of the positive ad is the negative ad. This is kind of like running that smear campaign, placing an attack ad on your opponent, trying to sow some scandal or something, dig up some dirt.
Nice.
How that works is if my opponent has a cube on the map, I can choose any 1 cube and remove it and put it back in their bank for them to later earn before they can spend it.
And you do not have to be in the same space as you remove it from. Is that correct?
Right.
Negative ad is countrywide.
Correct. You can
Okay.
take one off from anywhere, and it doesn't cost you anything to play. But both of these cards, the positive and the negative ad, you only have one each in your hand.
Okay.
The rally card, there's three.
Okay.
So those are the different ways that you can move around the country and kind of spread your influence. But the ways that you can gain influence are with the fundraiser. So you
Okay.
mentioned this earlier.
Yep.
This one, again, is pretty straightforward. For each fundraiser card you play, you simply take one influence cube out of your bank, place it into your hand.
Got it.
It doesn't matter if I played it first or you played it second, or I played 5 or 4 and you played 1.
Mm-hmm.
They're all worth the same. It's a slow and steady, pretty conservative way
Okay.
to gain influence. Now, the last card is the Super PAC, and this one is a little bit more complex than the others.
Okay.
So, remember I said that each player is going to choose 4 cards to play each round?
That's correct.
Whoever plays the most Super PAC cards will earn 4 influence cubes from the bank.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So if there's a tie and a few players play at least 1 Super PAC, all tied players only gain 2 influence cubes.
So they jokingly call me the lore master on the stream, and I'm picturing the lore from that is based on the fact that if you're spending time smoozing up to the Super PAC, it means that you're spending more time with them, so you need to spend more cards. And the person that spends more time, because then it means that you're not doing the rest of the stuff you need to do to get your name out there. So that's why you get the extra money.
Yeah, but it could be a huge benefit to you. Getting 4 influence cubes is a pretty big windfall.
Yes.
It shows the power that these Super PACs have.
They just redeemed Lore Master in the stream.
So with the Super PAC, I could potentially play 1 card and all my opponents don't play any and still get 4 influence cubes. Or the situation could come up where I'm going to go all out and I'm going to play 4 Super PAC cards, but so does one of my opponents, and we each only get 2 cards, 2 cubes, which isn't that great of a deal. So there's a little bit of risk involved. There's some tension there where you're trying to guess, who else is trying to play the Super PAC, who really needs cubes right now. Right. Should I just kind of go conservative and play fundraisers?
Right. Definite risk reward. Now these are all the cards here, right?
Right. So you have 4 Super PAC cards in your hand, and these are all the 14 ones that you have available.
And then once you play them, it goes into a discard for that round, or do you get all of them back at the end of the round?
So at the end of the round, you get your cards back to play the next round.
Okay.
There are some exceptions with various news cards that might limit your ability
to get cards back and stuff like that.
Right.
I like it. I like that. So very cool. So I like the balance of spending and earning the influence / money. Like you said, the cubes represent an amalgamation of money, influence, the whole package. You need to become the next, or at least run past the primary into the main election.
Right.
So very cool. I can already see like some really cool deep strategy just in each turn. Now the question I had real quick, if I play a plane, so let's say I play a rally card first, right? That's my first card. My second card is a plane. And then I could play another rally card, so I can rally in 2 locations in 1 round, or am I limited to how many places I can rally in a round?
No, you can rally in as many locations as you can travel to.
And how many cards am I allowed per round? 4 or 5?
4.
Okay.
There are some news cards that also affect that.
Okay. Wow, that's pretty. So, and how many cubes do you start with? How many influence cubes do you start with?
So the cubes that you start with are dependent on which candidate you're playing as.
Okay.
So everyone at the beginning of the game will be dealt 2 random candidate cards, and then you can choose one of them to play the rest of the game as. And they each have their own unique abilities, and then also a corresponding amount of starting influence cubes. So those range anywhere from 1 to maybe 7 or 8, depending on the candidate and how what kind of ability they have.
That's pretty excellent, because I mean, first turn right off the bat, like I'm thinking if I have enough cubes to support it, I'm gonna I'm gonna rally twice that first turn, get my numbers up.
Right.
Now, at the end of each of these rounds, you said that the numbers represent at what point those primary elections are held. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can explain a little bit. We kind of went through the second phase, which was action, where you're playing your cards and taking their actions, moving around the country and gaining influence or spending influence. So the third phase is the vote phase, and that's where we get to the voting that you were just talking about.
Okay.
So let's pretend it's round 8. So
Okay.
there will be a vote here. And
Mm-hmm.
there's also going to be a vote over here. There's some rounds where there's a double or triple vote where multiple regions are voting.
Okay.
Um, so in this, theoretical setup, um, the blue player would have 1, 2, 3 influence. Your pawn does count as an influence,
Okay.
so it matters where you physically are located once it comes time to vote. And in this setup, the red player would only have 2 influence. So the blue player would gain all 10 delegates, winner takes all,
Mm-hmm.
and they would become sort of his victory points or his delegates that you track around the edge of the board.
Okay.
In the other regions, there's a different setup where you can either have a winner takes all, where there's only one delegate value printed on the board,
Correct.
or let's say it's round 10 up here. There's a tiered system. There's a first place and a second place.
Got it. Yeah, just like the primaries.
Right. So there's a different system in place in this region. The blue player with his 3 influence would get 11 delegates for the first place award,
Mm-hmm.
and the red player would only get 5, sort of your consolation prize or some sort of proportional voting system in place there.
Awesome. I'm really digging the theme. The mechanics seem pretty solid to me. I'll throw it out to chat. Do you guys have any questions about the way the game works at this point, or any questions for Matt about the game? And we could just continue on. So,
Sure.
No, I really like it. I like that you didn't have like a player reference card. It's built right into the board. The action, the phases, news, action, vote, and then organize is what? Just cleanup phase, like everything comes back.
Essentially, yeah. So again, coming back to this scenario here, let's say we voted here in round 10. I took my delegates. The red player takes their delegates. The cubes are cleared off the map after the vote is done.
Mm-hmm.
You can flip this over to show that the vote has happened, and they go back into your bank. So you have to re-earn that influence before you can spend it somewhere else.
Okay, got it.
So you'll flip this over, show that the vote took place. You'll move these voting markers to the next round, and you'll pass first player, and you're ready to start the next round.
Okay, I like it. Reish, my answer to you is I pledged for 1 copy. I'm on a shoestring budget right now. But I mean, I could put Matt on the spot if you want. Matt, do you think in the future, like if you do get funded, would you like to come back to the stream and possibly do a giveaway with me, a joint giveaway for our viewers?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I would love to do that.
Well, there we go. So if Matt gets funded, you guys heard it here. We'll get back in touch with him and we'll do a joint stream, either playing this together, or playing another game together, and you guys can make fun of us while we play a game, and then get a copy of his game at the end of it all.
Yeah, that would be a blast.
The Young James Games, thank you so much for the big cheer. Thank you guys so much. But yeah, so Matt, that's the gist. Is there anything else you wanted to talk to us about with the game, or anything else you wanted to go over?
There's only one thing left.
Shoot.
There is a solo mode that I have been developing.
Right. That's the Electobot. Is that
right? Electobot 9000.
Perfect. Okay, go ahead.
So the intent with this was to mirror, the experience and the tension from the multiplayer game, and kind of distill it down into something that you could play with yourself if you ever wanted to.
Right.
So the premise is you're playing against a robotic incumbent candidate, the Electobot 9000.
Mm-hmm.
And since he's an incumbent candidate, you're going to start the game by rolling this die. There's values from 0 to 3. And for each region, you're going to roll the die and set up his starting influence.
Okay.
So he's going to start the game with influence out there in various regions, and you can adjust the difficulty depending on how many starting cubes that the Electobot begins the game with. The way that the action round works, and this is really the only main difference during the game, is you're going to choose your 4 cards as normal, and you're going to commit them in the left to right order. They don't need to be face down. You know, the bot can't cheat.
Okay.
And then you're going to choose one of his cards, you know, shuffled randomly, draw the top card off the deck, and you're going to place it in between your first 2 and your last 2 action cards.
Okay.
So you'll play your first card, you'll play your second card, and then it'll come up to the bot's turn.
Mm-hmm.
And on the bot card, I'll hold one up. I'm sure you won't be able to read it very well.
It's tough, yeah.
But there is a few criteria that you'll follow that will determine where the bot candidate moves. So for example, this one reads, you're going to move the bot to the region where the bot is winning. So if he has a lead in the influence in a certain region or regions, that's the first criteria.
Okay.
If that's not enough to determine the region that he would move to, you go to the second criteria. So it would say, move the bot to the region where the bot is winning and where he has the smallest margin of victory. So then you would keep following these criteria until you would narrow it down to one specific region where the bot is going to move.
Okay.
So all these bot cards are unique, and they'll kind of determine where the bot moves based on the state of the game board, the state of the game, where you are, where you have influence, what's voting next, all that kind of stuff.
Interesting.
So once he moves, there's a small text box that determines if he's going to play any influence cubes or place cubes in an adjacent region, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, you're going to re-roll this die, and that will determine how many super pack cards that the bot plays. Now, he doesn't need to gain influence before he deploys it. That's simply a way for him to try and block you from earning any influence from the super pack.
Okay.
So every card is different. If I roll a 3 on this round, it might result in him playing more or less super pack cards than it did the previous round. So over time, you can kind of get a feel for you know, his strategy, if you will, or what happens. But he's pretty hard to predict sometimes.
So it's not complete randomness. There's you can still sort of try to control or counter him, but there is you know, there's an unpredictability around it.
Sure. Yep. Exactly.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I like the way the board's laid out. I think you guys, the fact that you were able to partner with those guys for the art is phenomenal, because I think the art looks great.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any more questions from our viewers at this point. But yeah, I want to thank you for your time tonight, man. I know you got a busy schedule, and you're almost there. I mean, I think you're gonna at least hit minimum. I'd love to be able to hit some of those juicy stretch goals, because you know we all want that.
Right.
But I'm gonna throw the link up one more time for anybody who's watching. The game is the primary. It is currently on Kickstarter. The base pledge is, you could pledge $1 or more just to support the campaign, if you can't afford the whole game but you want to actually put some money toward it. Are you going to be going through backer kit at the end of it?
I don't think I will.
Okay.
I don't really have any add-ons or more complex shipments other than just the base game, really.
Right.
So I'm probably just going to go through the standard Kickstarter survey, but I'll make sure to give, you know, a warning to those people who haven't had a chance to back for the full copy, just to make sure if, you know, things change financially or whatever, that you'll have an opportunity at the very end.
Yeah. So if you put it like $1 in just to support the campaign, excuse me, you will get a message from him at the end of the campaign that if you want to bump up your pledge to the full amount, you can do so. The $1 donation would get you into the private message group, basically through Kickstarter, that anytime there's an update, you'll get an email and you'll be kept appraised of what's happening behind the scenes. Otherwise, you won't get those update messages because they're behind that I guess we could call it a paywall, but it's really just if you're a
Mhm.
supporter, you get different messages than the public.
Right. And
Uh,
one thing with that, actually, if I could jump in,
Absolutely, yeah.
the stretch goals that we're doing with this are a little bit different. Since it is an election political themed game,
Hmm.
all the stretch goals are determined by the backers and voting. So if you want, you could
Okay.
back at $1 and still have access to the voting that helps determine which stretch goals get unlocked. So you can kind of have your voice heard and help shape the game a little bit, even if you don't have the chance to fully pledge just yet.
Yep. And just a quick number update. You're at about 10,310 toward the $15,000 goal. So
Awesome.
about two thirds of the way, right around there. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not a
Yeah.
math guy. But yeah, 13 days to go. So let's try to get just make sure he gets this game out there into the wild. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to have it at our table, and I can't wait to have you on again in the future, Matt, so
Yeah. Thanks.
we can play this together, and and we'll talk after at the end of this too. We'll go over some stuff. So, but overall, is there anything else you'd like to say before we sign out for the evening?
Um, Not really. Just again, a big thanks to everyone who's been following along, and especially the backers who, have been showing such amazing support and excitement. And just want to thank you again, and people who joined in tonight. Thanks for tuning in and watching.
Definitely. Big thank you for me too, as always. And I think all of us, big thank you to Matt again for being a part of the community tonight, and sharing your story with us and any designers that might watch this video in the future. Because every little bit of sharing helps, I think, when you're a hobbyist in this crazy industry.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Excellent. So what I'm going to do